What's up, y'all? How we doing? For today's video, I'm gonna be drinking coconut water again. I like this one, man. My body keeps asking for it. So I'm gonna give it to myself. Now for today's video, I am 33 days sober off of weed and steroids. I quit painkillers probably about 5 years ago now. And I haven't been drinking alcohol for probably a good 2 years. The topic for today's video is really going to be why I left the church, man. When I was young, I was raised Christian. I was raised Protestant. No disrespect to people who really believe, if that's your thing, you might not want to watch this video. But if you're open to other opinions, maybe you do, right? Or if you're curious why I do what I do, believe what I believe, maybe it's for you. But when I was young, my parents used to take me to church every Sunday. I was in Sunday schools. I was in youth groups, right? I did Young Life. I did Wildlife. I went to church camps. I went to drama camps that were themed by the church. A lot of my close friends are still a member of the church. I'm glad that, I still get to be friends with them. Some people don't interact with me because of my beliefs, right? But I remember from the very beginning, I asked a lot of questions. A lot of questions. Questions that people didn't really want to answer. Let me pause real quick. I forgot to mention the ring I have on today is sapphire and emerald. And I have 2-in-1 ring on a silver band. So today's Wednesday. The ruling planet is Mercury. Per the Vedic system of gemstones, emerald, the green emerald, is the stone for today. But back to what I was talking about. I used to ask a lot of questions. And I remember one of the first questions I asked when I heard that this entity they called God lived forever and went back as far as the past was, forever living, immortal. And the way that this was handled, I think, already started to push me away. So in hindsight, when I raised my hand and asked this question, the priest really didn't like that. And he had a clever way of navigating that and sending me that message. And rather than punish me, he took the grooming kind of route, Luckily, I don't think anything happened with the Catholic priests and the altar boys and things like that. But I'll be dead honest with you. I still have a lot of repressed memories based on childhood abuse, so I don't know. I am awfully satanic and anti-Christian, and the people I know that are that had a negative experience with a priest or a nun or something along those lines. Now, it could just be because my father and his siblings, whether they'll admit it or not, were certainly abused by nuns, and most likely also priests. I'm not going to name him, but I have an uncle who was so afraid of the nuns, he would put a row of paper towels in front of his desk because he anticipated wetting himself out of fear. But back to my story. So when I asked these questions, right, and I took this seriously, because what I've noticed is many people who believe what I believe started out as incredibly loyal students of the church, students of the Bible. We asked one too many questions and got to maybe what is the truth. You may be familiar with the author, Friedrich Nietzsche. He has a book titled The Antichrist. If you study this man, you'll find out that he went to college to study the Bible and Christianity as a loyal Christian. Yes, he did. But anyway, so when I asked these questions, he didn't answer them, first of all. I did not receive answers to my questions. Second of all, I was taken aside. I was set aside. And he had a private little meeting with me and my parents. And he said, your son shows the traits of a leader. he shows the traits of a leader. And what I realize now is that was a little dig because they didn't want leaders, did they? No. So I was seen to be as disruptive. I was seen to be as these things. But this moment of almost reward where, hey, you're a leader, that wasn't the same thing as answering my question. So I was puffed up with this false sense of positivity and then sent back into the room as if, that was a good thing. But that kind of started a pattern where the more questions I had, the more seriously I took things, the more I was singled out and the less answers I got. Now, I personally notice a pattern amongst treating children a certain way. It's almost mandatory to have a Sunday school in your church. It makes it much easier to get that tax-free status. This is one of my biggest issues with the satanic temple, which is really just claiming to be satanic temple, right? They have child programs that they're running. And the acronyms for these child programs are ASS and things like that I don't really agree with. If I hypothetically were to run my own religious organization, you'd have to be 18 years or older to participate, right? And not because any of it's sexual, even though if you look at the Bible, there's secret little things woven into it, like virgins getting pregnant, 90-year-olds getting pregnant, certain things like that start to ask the questions, well, how do babies get made, right? But that's a whole other topic. But I personally, the more I learned and the more I studied, right, I read the Bible front to back multiple times. First as a student, then maybe as a critic. And there are things that jump out as something that I don't like. And my entire life, I can tell you what I have not liked is to be lied to. I don't like to be lied to at all. And maybe I have a huge ego thinking that I can find the truth. But something very simple like the laws of physics, who were probably set up by a creator entity, don't need to be broken by that entity, right? That would be a little hypocritical. Let's say you're a referee and you're refereeing a game. And every player in the game has to follow the rules. And then you decide to put yourself in the game, but you don't have to follow those rules. Like, let's say you're playing one-on-one against an NBA ref, and he gets to travel. He doesn't have to dribble the ball. That isn't the same thing as creating a game that you love and really fortifying the rules of that. So to take that up a notch, a practice like something like circumcision, I think is pretty backwards and pretty off. We live in a world where people use a scientific or a hygienic explanation oftentimes to justify such a thing. But if you look at the origins of it and you look at the impacts of it, what's the point of it, right? And where's the opportunity to consent? Because you could see that as genital mutilation, depending on who you ask. And many people who participated in that, myself included, had no say, right? There's a shirt I've seen which is kind of funny, but it's humor is usually coming from a place of deep tension, which is I want my foreskin back, right? Not possible though. So just something to think about. But as I find lies like virgins getting pregnant, dead men coming back to life, water walking, 90-year-olds getting pregnant, the focus on a bunch of babies being passed over, but then a very large group of babies literally being murdered, like that's a good thing. Those kind of jumped out at me. And I noticed that I'm not really allowed to criticize it, right? The more I speak out against it, the more resistance I face. I'm no longer allowed to publish books on Amazon as a KDP. I think it's KDP. I forget what it is. The Amazon author system. I can't make books on Amazon as an author anymore. I can't use my name. I can't use my artist name because I have a song called The Cremation of the Corpse of Christ. And that's deemed to be inappropriate, and that breaks the terms of use, even though it's clearly a satanic piece of literature, which is supposed to be a recognized and respected religion now. But you can tell it's not really how it works. So I left the church because on a small scale, I was kind of pushed out of it, right? I was kicked out of an Episcopalian school when I was 13, 14 years old on my first major offense, which was stealing some food from the cafeteria, which I'll admit was wrong. You know what I mean? In hindsight, that was the opportunity to teach me why stealing was wrong, because the real reason I stole that food was to use it as social currency. I didn't have any friends. So what I did was I would steal food from the cafeteria and give it to all my friends. And that gave me, a way in. So if somebody sat down and said, hey, somebody's paying for all this. This is coming out of something. This is coming out of somebody's mouth. This is, not okay for us all to pay for it and for you to get it for free. That could have been the opportunity to really teach me something. But as my first offense, that was an opportunity to get rid of me. And I feel like that was pretty obvious then that I wasn't really as welcome there as it might have seemed like. But I'll also admit that we had to go to chapel every Sunday when I was at military school. And I know that people feel different ways about certain things, so I'll just be dead honest with you. Sometimes it's necessary, because I do believe in military, I do believe in violence, I do believe in warfare when necessary. But the thing that I don't necessarily agree with is taking a 14-year-old boy and putting him through a program designed to create essentially killers, right? I know me and my brothers, I won't speak for anybody. Some of us double down and go in certain directions, and some people I went to school with had a really hard time or reprogramming themselves out of becoming a human weapon. So, Valley Forge Military Academy, they say they forge boys into men. But becoming a human weapon doesn't just automatically make you a man. No disrespect to the military and people who fight for their country. That's a little different than doing this to a child so that they'll behave, right? You might disagree with me. But I don't want to take away any sense of pride that, me and my brothers might have for completing that rigorous program. But I remember self-analyzing over the years and asking, why do I have urges? Why do I have abilities that I notice maybe people that I see are normal don't have? Why is it so easy for me to pull a trigger on something? Why is it so easy for me to flip that switch and go into robot mode and not feel anything? I learned how to do it. And maybe that was always in me, right? And maybe that came out there. That's up for debate. But I noticed that part of the letting go to your instincts and your beast self and not being afraid of death, because if you're really a warrior, you have to face death and not fear it. If you really believe that you're guaranteed a ticket into heaven, it's much easier for you to die. If anything, you almost want to. So another reason why I left the church is because I used to play in death metal bands, deathcore bands, and I'm a big fan of the music. And there's a line in a song by I Think Thy Art Is Murder where he says, I can't wait to die. He says that. He says, I can't wait to die. And it's such a negative, dark thing to say and feel. And I started writing my own music and I started interpreting lyrics poetically. And it kind of dawned on me that Thy Art Is Murder lyric is woven into pretty much every song I was forced to sing on Sunday at Sunday school as a child and as a young adult. Now it's flowery, it's sugar-coated, but the gist of it is I can't wait to meet God. I can't wait to go to heaven. I can't wait to die, essentially. I'm looking forward to it. That's a suicidal spirit in disguise. So people might not agree with that, but because I know we live in a world where there are people who are evil and hurt children and things like that, and I personally see that to be unforgivable, maybe because what was done to me as a child, but you can't just wash your hands in holy water every Sunday and get back into heaven, in my opinion, and just be forgiven, in my opinion. Some things are unforgivable. And Protestantism may have evolved past the Catholic barbarianism of at one point you could buy your way into heaven, just pay the priest and pay the Pope. Or, you say this number of Hail Marys and then you're in. But it's the same book. It's the same essence. It's the same book that children are given and told to read from. And the last thing I'll reference is music and musicians. I believe that Michael Jackson was character assassinated before he was physically assassinated. I do. Call me a conspiracy theorist, whatever you want. And I noticed his last album, Escape, is not pushed on people the same way that maybe Bad is, right? I think that's also part of why he might have been hit. Because if you read the lyrics to Escape, first of all, on the album cover, the X is a tilted cross. And then he's speaking about escaping, right? It's a play off of the word escape. But Escape is also kind of like a matrix, like a world made out of X, right? And Xmas, Christ, cross, there's a connection there. So he has lyrics that say, everything is run by the book. And you've heard the expression, do this by the book, right? By the rule book, right, is the unwritten part of that. What is the rule book for the society that I personally live in, let alone many of us? Of course, it's the Bible and those 10 Commandments and other aspects of it. I can get behind something like thou shalt not murder. That makes a lot of sense. You shouldn't really kill somebody. But what if they're trying to kill you? Then you still shouldn't murder. You should just let them kill you. You should turn the other cheek and let them just cut you all up. And that's the difference between the Christian spirit and the satanic spirit, I think, in my opinion, and why I chose to walk in what people would call the darkness and not the light. Because the Son of God is also the Son of God, the sun in the sky, the Son under the Father. And if you stare into the sun long enough, you will go blind. I don't think any of these things are coincidences. If you do, or you think I'm crazy, God bless you. You know what I mean? Whatever God you believe in, I hope you're happy. But if you have questions and you never got your answers, and if you've had a similar experience to me, where you felt not only alienated, but most likely rejected for thinking things through a little too deeply, going off of what you feel, not just what you see, then this might make a little sense. But to anybody who wants to understand me better, these are the reasons why I left the church and don't plan on going back. As long as it's based on that book, which I believe is lies, which if you study it, it was paid for by King James, who was a British king. He was in a bit of a back and forth between the Vatican ever since the schism of Henry VIII, right, when they broke off. There's been a little competition. There's a theory that whoever William Shakespeare was actually a pen name for Sir Francis Bacon. If you study the writings enough, you'll find overlap, right? If you don't believe that, fine. That's fine. But the more I dig, the more I see certain things happening. And the last piece I'll add is the actual name Jesus itself. I believe that it's the combination of the name Jehovah and Zeus, Jesus. And you might not believe that, fine. That's fine. But I notice when you study Zeus, he really likes to impregnate human women, right? And that's where even if you try to hide the spirit, it'll come out. Because the thing that I don't understand is why would a male god need to impregnate a human woman? Why isn't there a female god? So all I can do is think about what I know, as above, so below. There are certain tiers of hierarchies of people that I've noticed. The same way that if a 12th grader can't find a girl in his own grade to date, he might shoot down a grade, right? Date an 11th grader. Something like that's socially acceptable. What if the same things work dimensionally? What if for some reason this god was seen as undesirable by the female gods? So he had to shoot down a rung. It's just a possible theory. But these are the reasons why I left the church, personally, and why I don't plan on going back. Lies and liars. And I just don't like it, man. So beyond that, we live somewhere we're supposed to have religious freedom. So I like to test if I actually have that. And most often, I don't know that I do. I've lost jobs. I've lost the ability to publish books on Amazon now, right? Different things have happened. But also, I'm lucky enough to be able to say this and not be burned alive, like maybe would have happened in Salem. So you can't say that no progress has been made either. And I can't forget to deploy some gratitude. But if anything, I owe everybody who stood on this and died to use the freedoms that I now have to the fullest degree, right? I don't want to sacrifice human beings. I don't want to drink blood, right? I just want to tell the truth and know the truth. I would enjoy that. But that's why I left the church and why I don't really plan on going back. And maybe one day I would establish my own religious organization because I'm American and I love the idea of freedom of choice. So if I could actually establish a path here and even partner up with who I feel like are respectable Judeo-Christians, I would have no problem with that, man. But that's out of my hands. I can only do my best. But that's why. So, moving on. I'd also like to reference a book. This book is called Prometheus Rising. It's by Robert Anton Wilson. Now, this might sound familiar to some of you. You might recognize the name Prometheus in my name. This book, in my opinion, is very valuable and exciting because what it does is it breaks down the human being as if we were a machine. Almost as if it's written by the engineer who created us, right? A level of understanding of the circuitry and the mechanics of the human experience and the human system, which when you understand, if you wish to rewire and re-engineer yourself, rebirth yourself, you are able to use these tactics to do so. Now, this book, Prometheus Rising, is not the easiest book to find. I had to get a used copy, but it's also not burned. It's not censored. It's not completely out of print. So I would advise that you get a hand on it. Get your hands on a copy. If you can read it, I think it's very worthwhile. I got a lot out of it, and I really enjoyed reading it. So much so that it maybe even inspired my name a little bit. But what people need to understand about Prometheus and the Promethean fire is Prometheus actually defied Zeus, right? The same way that maybe I'm standing against something like Jehovah Zeus, as I'll call him, Zeus said, I'm going to wage war against the humans, and I'm going to enslave them all. And when I have them all as my slaves, they're going to work for me. And Prometheus said, I helped create humans, and I don't really want to see my creation do such a thing, be in such a state. So Prometheus, the Titan of fire, which if you don't know, Titans are one generation above gods. They're a little bit weaker, but they created them. The same way that a parent might create a child, and then that child might evolve past that parent in terms of power. Very similarly to how maybe Judaism turned into Christianity, right? Or Islam, and the way that these things are Abrahamic at the core, and they evolve. So Prometheus gave human beings fire, aka knowledge, divine knowledge. Something like this, something like the ability to rewire and rework yourself rather than just following the shepherd wherever he leads you, even if it's off the end of a cliff. I'll remind you that shepherds eat more lamb and wear more wool than anybody. It's like the guy who grows his own weed to smoke as much of it as he wants, right? But that's a whole other topic. But I like this book. It's a good book. Prometheus himself was punished for defying Zeus. There's a very popular story, common, where he was enslaved, where a vulture would peck out his liver every single day, and then every single night it would regenerate so that he could experience the same pain the next day. Torture, a hellish type of punishment, right? But what most people don't know is that because of Prometheus, a character named Hercules ended up existing. Now, Hercules was strong enough to free Prometheus. So this pain and this torture for his crime to help people in an unjust system was temporary, and he was freed from that by the direct result of his work. That's why it speaks to me personally and why I added it to my personal training system, my name and my brand, because for a long time, these things that somewhere like Valley Forge gave me tortured me, caused me a lot of pain, and even other people. I used it to hurt and scare other people at one point. I'm not proud of that. And so when I was able to take that and morph it into something that I could really feel in my heart help people, like even while I was on steroids, 100% of the people I coached were off of drugs, off of steroids, off of these poisons. And they had children and they had different aspects where, I'll be honest with you, if somebody wants to be a competitive bodybuilder in the IFBB, or if you want to be in the Olympics in certain physical sports or professional NFL player, you might have to get a little juicy at some point. Nobody wants to admit that. But if you want to compete against people who are at the highest level, even at the highest level of something like jiu-jitsu competitions or the fighting world, it's not a coincidence that John Jones, one of my favorite athletes of all time, he pissed a little hot a couple times. And I think that he might have just got the timing off, because most athletes will flush it out of their system before they get tested or before they perform, right? But that's up for debate, because that's one of the best kept secrets of professional sports. I was very proud of the fact that I was able to help people and use my mistakes to cause people to not make the same mistakes. And now I'm even more proud of the fact that any hypocritical spirit I had is gone. Now that when I tell somebody, hey, you shouldn't do this, I wake up and I go to bed and I also don't do this. So it took me a little while to get there. Maybe my spirit was trapped. Maybe my liver was still getting pecked out. I'll be honest with you, when I was popping anadrols and on a gram of test and taking Tren, that probably wasn't great for my liver. So I notice overlap and consistency in some of these stories. I like the pantheon of the Roman Greek gods. I like Hades, I like Saturn, I like Uranus, I like Neptune, right? I like these stories. I even work with and speak to Zeus sometimes, right? Because I've noticed that a handful of people use Christianity to hurt children. Think about something like the priests who hurt their altar boys, right? Now, any man who doesn't use this for evil is my ally, because he's a younger or older me, seeking truth, seeking to do good things, right? But anybody who falls into that trap or uses those as tools to accumulate power and influence and hurt people, even BTK, bind, torture, kill, one of the worst, most disgusting serial killers you could find, committed a couple of his crimes or hid some things in a church. He was active member of his church, man. So I'm not going to say that everybody that goes to church is evil. I'll close out with one of my strongest opinions. It is a pyramid. So if you study Catholicism, for example, 99% of people who call themselves Catholic are good people who are seeking the truth, who put their money, who put their soul, who put their time forward, and don't know what happens behind closed doors under the altar in the Vatican when the doors close, right? We're looking at a very small group of leadership who's potentially evil, but it's hard to know because of how secretive everything is. Well, we have enough data to understand that there is a systemic organized problem, that when somebody has been discovered to hurt children, the first attempt is to deny and sidestep, and the second attempt is to rotate and move that person. And then if all hell breaks loose, finally the person's fired and maybe charged legally, right? There exists a massive fund to pay out people and pay settlements and different things like that. And the last thing I would tell you is land ownership is power in this world. So if you want to know who wields power, look at who owns the most land on earth. I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. This is what I believe. This is what I found. If I'm wrong, you can let me know. If you believe something else, I will not try to stop you. But this is why I left the church, and why I even call myself Prometheus or Promethean. That's enough for today. Prometheus out.